you're feeling good? Anxious? Nervous? Okay, it's good to be nervous. Okay. So now, let's address the most important question, that is, we don't know anything about economics. Why are we even sitting in an economics class? We are not going to do this ever. We are not expected to do this. Why do we even need to know about economics? The first thing is, we are both means, you guys and me, we are on the same ship. We are sailing on the same ship. I know a little bit more than you about economics, and you know a lot more than me about nursing and anesthesiology. I have never gone through anesthesia. My experience with anesthesia is local anesthesia. Tooth being pulled out, wisdom tooth, that's it. I'm equally scared of nurses, although they are very nice people, okay? And anesthesia, God save me, I don't know what will happen, okay? So we are on the same boat. Everybody cannot know everything. Similarly, we don't know everything. I do not know a lot of things in your profession. You, of course, you don't know much about economics, but trust me, you know much more than me about economics without realizing than I know about your profession. Okay? So we are on the same boat, first. Secondly, presuming that you have never seen economics in your life as a formal subject in high school or in college, some of you may have taken a course in economics here and there, but if, way back you don't remember anything, things like that. 0 is a great number to start from. The number system starts from 0. Okay, so it's a great number to start from. So you can build. If you are at 5, there is a possibility of coming down or going up. From 0, you're only going to go into the positive. You're assuming the negative scale away. Okay, so economists make opportunist assumptions everywhere. So I'm making opportunistic assumption that the negative scale does not even exist. Okay, that's the first thing. Secondly, also from the instructor's perspective, and I may be wrong, but that is how I look at it. It's kind of nice and it's kind of easy to write on a blank sheet of paper. It's difficult and messy to erase stuff and write. It becomes messy. So you guys are like a blank sheet of paper for me. Whatever I tell you, I know you're going to put in 100% effort in learning and kind of, exploring that, rather than trying to, oh, I know this from the other class and whatever she's saying is BS. Okay? I know you're not going to do that. You're going to put in effort in believing in what I say, researching about what I say, and then kind of, making it your own. So it's a good place to be in for me as the instructor. You have a tentative schedule given here on the last page of the syllabus. I'm going to try and stick to this schedule as much as possible. Okay? It may not be always possible to kind of stick to this schedule because it depends on the pace of teaching, especially when we are in a classroom where you'll be learning certain things for the first time. We may have to go into deliberations and discussions, so it might take a little bit of time than what I set out for, but I think I can more or less stick to this. Okay, so here is a tentative schedule. This is what we are going to follow. If for healthcare economics, the backbone is microeconomics, which is a branch, which is a broad branch of economics. Okay, we have 2 broad branches, and I will talk to you in a little bit about those 2 branches. Microeconomics, healthcare economics is kind of based on microeconomics. So even before we venture into actual healthcare economics, you will need a little bit of foundation into microeconomics. And you have already formally got started on that because you have a link to the I-course by Dr. Ken Brown, who is the department head in the economics department. He has done a similar thing in the studio, the I-course, and you have his videos. If you have seen the announcement made by me, I asked you to watch 1.1 through 1.4 by Thursday. Okay? If you go beyond that, it's up to you. If you like watching videos, go for it. But you have to watch 1.1 to 1.4. That's the requirement. If you ask me, I advise you not to go beyond that right now. It might get a little overwhelming. I will tell you when to go beyond that. Maybe next week you will go beyond that, over the weekend and next week. But till Thursday, just watch those 4 videos, 1.1 through 1.4. Okay? Along with those videos, now where can you find those videos? You can find the videos on A&E SOS. Okay? And by tomorrow, you can also find those videos on the Blackboard course page, because Dr. Fine is going to kind of integrate them. Okay? So you can find it on the course page also by tomorrow. That's one. Secondly, you already have lecture note 1 posted on your Blackboard course page. What is that lecture note 1? The lecture note 1 is a broad summary. It's not a detailed document. It's kind of a summary of what you're going to watch in those videos. So you're not going to find word for word from the videos in the lecture note, but it kind of tells you, it kind of summarizes for you what you have just watched in those videos. So the ideal thing for you to do would be to watch the videos, take your own notes. Notes could be questions or comments or whatever you feel like when you watch those videos, then go to the lecture note. Some of your questions may get answered when you read that lecture note. Other questions you can kind of bring that to me. Now you might be a student who benefits by reading the textbook, and you cannot absolutely do without a textbook. Okay? Then I have given you a reference textbook on the syllabus, second page of the syllabus. You have a link right there for an open source microeconomics textbook. It is okay for you guys, okay? Because this is not your primary material. This is just for help. If you absolutely need a textbook, if you're a student who needs a textbook to feel comfortable about a subject, then refer to this textbook. And this is available in the soft format on your iPad, or you could kind of get the PDF, or you could print out a hard copy. They have different formats available. Okay, you can get that. Now, my suggestion to you would be keep this as the last resort. Watch the videos, read the lecture note, attend the class, ask me questions. Even then, if you have some other question, go to the textbook. Okay? Do not overstudy, because this is not your actual course. Okay? That's one thing. The next thing is, kind of lost, what was I thinking about? Okay, that's about microeconomics. Now, after microeconomics, after a few classes of microeconomics review, we are going to move into the material for healthcare economics. When we move into your healthcare economics part, you will wonder, what are you going to study for healthcare economics? The same thing, you do not have a textbook. The reason being, there are several healthcare economics textbooks, great ones, available in the market, but those are all designed for graduate students with solid foundation in economics, for econ majors, econ PhD students, econ master's students. So if I give you a textbook like that, it's just putting in some money. It won't help you. And I have seen a lot of textbooks before, kind of coming up with the syllabus. There is no one textbook that does justice for students like you with non-econ majors. So that's why I have not assigned a textbook for you, but you have certain references. There are reference textbooks, 3 of those mentioned. If anything is required from the textbook, I will scan the pages and put it on Blackboard. Okay? So you don't have to buy those 3 textbooks. But you have to buy one book, and that's not a textbook. That is the T.R. Reid book, which is on your syllabus, Healing of America. Okay? And I absolutely encourage you to invest money on that book, because that is a book that you should have as a healthcare professional. It basically does what it does. It compares the healthcare system of your country, United States, with other countries, other developed countries like Canada, I think it's Canada, Japan. So it kind of compares the healthcare system of USA with other countries. And I think that's an interesting thing to do for any healthcare professional or anybody who has interest in healthcare. It's nice to know what is happening in other developed countries. So that is the book, and it's not a textbook. You must buy that book. That book is available on Amazon. You can get a used copy of the textbook from wherever. You can rent it if it's available. There are some copies available in the library. But I suggest that you get a copy of that textbook, a hard copy or a soft copy. It's available on Amazon. That's the one you must buy. And I don't think it's super expensive. Okay? That's about materials. Any questions up to this point? Any questions? Okay. Now that brings me to the most important part of the method of instruction. As far as my teaching goes, I like to kind of call my teaching style SLR, and this has got nothing to do with your single lens reflective cameras, SLR cameras. SLR, S stands for shared learning. I believe in a shared learning environment. That means if you have a question, speak out. It helps me to think, it helps others to think, and it helps you. In a classroom setting like this, in a graduate school, shared learning is very important. So reach out. This is one instructor versus 23 students. Unless you tell me your questions, it's difficult for me to kind of mind read, as much as I would want to do that. Okay? So shared learning, S. L is limited textbook use, as you can see. No point kind of cramping stuff from the textbook. It's better to kind of relate what you learn in the class with the real world. So that's exactly what we are going to do. And then you have R, that is reaching out, and not just reaching out for academic help. In graduate school, you have several issues coming up with personal life, and all of you, I'm sure you have, beyond graduate school, you have a life of your own. There are several issues with kids, whatever happening, which is kind of coming in the way for doing well in class. If you feel that is something you should share with me and you will benefit, please feel free to do that. Okay? And more importantly, interact with each other, which I think you all already do, because that's my experience from the previous cohort. They were very helpful to each other. Help each other out. Okay? Like I told you, somebody getting an A and you getting a B does not matter at the end of the day. You might end up with a better job. Trust me. So, that does not matter at all in graduate school. Don't be worried about grades. Just help each other out. So that is pretty much the method that we are going to follow. Okay. Now next is, why are you, people with 5, 10, 15 years of experience in healthcare as nurses, should be sitting in a class and taking this healthcare economics course from an economist? Why? Why is it necessary? The reason is, from the point I started, you are already economists. You are already economists without realizing. You are using economics every day in your personal and professional life without realizing, unknowingly. Just that right now, after this course, from January or maybe within a month from now, you will be able to join those dots. You will be able, when you see something, when you do something in your own life, in your professional life, you will be able to relate it to a theory. You will be able to tell yourself, oh, this is the theory that it comes from. Now I know this is why this is happening this way. Okay, so you are already doing things just as an economist would tell you to do, but just that you don't know that there is a theory, there's a skeleton in the background. Okay, so the purpose of this course is to give you a little more formal background into why you do certain things as a healthcare professional, why you do certain things in strategy A and you don't take strategy B. So it tells you, it gives you a logic, and secondly, it just makes you more informed citizens. That's what I tell my undergraduate advisees. You should take at least one economics course during your college, because it just makes you more informed citizens. Okay, so that's the reason. Secondly, as healthcare professionals, you are very important decision makers. At certain stages, you answer very important questions for your patients, for your people you work for. So anybody who is at a position of making decisions, we all make decisions, big or small, at every point in our life. You wake up in the morning, you decide whether you're going to wear a black t-shirt or a gray t-shirt. You walk out of the house, you decide, am I going to wear flip-flops or sneakers? Am I going to drive the car or am I going to take the bike? You are making a choice, you're taking a decision at every point in your life, big or small. Am I going to eat salad or am I going to make some rice? We are making a decision, we are picking a choice at every point in our life, unknowingly, without making a big deal. But in your professional field, as nurses, as anesthesiologists, you will be making life-changing decisions for other people, right? So it is important for you to understand the value of choices, Why do you make choices? Why can't you do everything? Why do you have to pick one over the other? And if you do, then what is the right choice for you? What should guide your choice? Right? That is the reason that healthcare professionals, nurses, people like you should have some background into economic theory. That kind of justifies it. And you will only be studying the theory that backs up only that part. You won't be doing anything fancy that is not required. Okay? Is that fine? That's the reason that you are in an economics class. Because often when I go out and people ask me, what do you do for a living? And I say, I'm an economics professor. The next question is, what should I do with my money? Should I put it in the share market? If I put it in the share market, after 2 years, am I going to have a profit? For God's sake, we are not financial planners, right? It's a different discipline. Finance, accounting, economics, these are not all clubbed together. They are different disciplines. We don't deal with money, okay? We don't tell people how to make money and where to put money and how to earn more money from a certain amount of money. We don't tell people that. Then what do? Money is not the subject matter of economics, okay? Have that clear in your head on day one. What is the subject matter of economics then? Economics is just what I told you. It's the science, it is a subject that deals with choices. It's a subject, it's the study of choices, okay? And we like to glorify our profession as economists. We like to glorify our profession by saying, you know what, we are social scientists. It's a social science and we are social scientists, okay? Now, if I say scientist, the first thing that comes to your mind is somebody working in the laboratory, right? A physics lab or a chemistry lab or a botany lab, working with reagents, acids, different machines, lenses, stuff like that. The country, the economy, the society, whatever name you want to call it, that is our laboratory. And what are we working with? What are the subjects? Who are the subjects? People like you and me, the part of society. We live in the society, so we are the subjects of economists. So as economists, we are running experiments in this society. This is our workspace. And the people in the society, people like you and me, these are the people, these are our research subjects, okay? Now there is a special name, just like you have in chemistry, you have, reagents and acids and salts and stuff like that. In economics, we also have a name. Let me get Shubha out of the way. We have a special name for the people who live in this society, and the name is economic agents. So we are all economic agents. You, me, we are all economic agents. Okay, everybody who is in society is an economic agent. Now, when you work in a physics, when somebody works, and you guys may have taken physics and chemistry courses in college since you've done nursing, when you work in a physics lab, before running an experiment, you have to check whether the instrument is faulty or not. Calibration, you have to do all that. In chemistry lab, you have to see, okay, I have to run this experiment, these are the stuff I need. You have to check whether, the concentration, the percentage concentration is correct. If the reagents have not expired, they're all fine, right? So you have to check all that. There are restrictions. You do it under certain controls, under certain restrictions imposed on the reagents and the setup and the environment for the experiment. Similarly for us, we impose certain restrictions, we make certain assumptions for these economic agents. And these are people like you and me. So there are certain restrictions imposed on us in this subject economics. What is the most primary restriction? The primary restriction is we assume that all economic agents are rational. So we are not dealing with any crazy people in economics. So we are assuming that everybody, all individuals in society are rational. Whatever they do is a rational behavior. She will not walk into the room and suddenly punch my face. And I'm not going to go and slap somebody, okay, without a reason. So we are not dealing with crazy behavior here. We assume that everything is happening for a reason. There's a rational to it. So we are only studying rational behavior in economics. Okay? Then moving on, just like in physics, if you're doing an experiment with lenses, you know there's different kind of lenses. You have a convex lens, you have a concave lens based on the, what kind of lens you're using. There's a different focal length for each lens in chemistry. If you're using a concentrated acid, there will be some other reaction. If you're using a diluted acid, something else. Concentrated acids can be of different types, hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, so on and so forth, right? Similarly, in economics, we don't make things as complicated. We have two different kinds of economic agents. We give two different names to them. Buyers, sometimes also called consumers, also called demanders. Okay? And you have the sellers, also called producers, also called suppliers. Means the same thing. Okay? So, the people in the society, they can be divided into these two groups, buyers and sellers. Now, there is role reversal taking place. That means, what I mean by role reversal is, a buyer is not always a buyer. So, if you are a buyer today, you're not going to be a buyer for the rest of your life. If you're a seller today, you're not going to be a seller for the rest of your life. Okay? And you may be a buyer of one good and you may be the seller of another good. So that means a buyer is not always a buyer. A seller is not always a seller. You may be buyer at point A, time point A, and the same buyer may be a seller at time point B. What I mean is, let's say this semester you buy the Healing of America textbook. You're a buyer. Right? Next semester you don't need it anymore, you decide to go and sell that book. You become a seller of the same good, the same textbook. In economics, any product is also called a good, G-O-O-D, commodity, as in commodity, and I'm going to use that all the time. I don't mean it in the way good and bad. Okay? So you may be a buyer of a good at time point A, but you may become a seller of the same good at time point B. Okay? Similarly, at time point A, at the same time point, you may be buying one good and selling another good, right? For example, in this classroom, I am the supplier. I am imparting education to you. I am the producer or the supplier. You are the consumer or the buyer because you are getting this education from me. Tomorrow, you get a job at Mercy Hospital. I go to you. You might be selling your services, your healthcare services to me. There, I become the buyer, you become the seller or the supplier. Okay? So there is always role reversal taking place at every point in time or between two time points. A buyer is not always a buyer, and a buyer of one good may be the seller of another good during the same time point. Is that clear? So in economics, we are basically studying the interaction between these two groups of people. We are studying the interaction, two-way interaction between these two groups of people. Okay? That is the basic premise of economics. Now, when you study the interaction between one buyer and one seller, when the unit is one, okay, so I'm studying the interaction of one particular buyer and one particular seller, or I'm studying the interaction between the buyers and sellers of one particular commodity. That is called microeconomics, because the name suggests micro, so the focus is narrow, looking at one thing at a time. Okay? I sell a textbook to you, you buy that book from me. We are looking at this interaction, how this exchange is taking place. This is studied in microeconomics. Okay? A patient goes to a physician, the physician provides the services to that single patient. It's under microeconomics. It's an interaction we are studying between a buyer and a seller, right? A supplier and a demander. But it is for one person. It is an interaction. It's a personalized interaction between two economic agents. That is microeconomics. Is that clear? And sometimes it may not be one person, but it may be one commodity. For example, let's say we are trying to see the interactions between buyers and sellers at Mercy Healthcare System. So we are studying interactions within the Mercy Healthcare System, but we are looking at all buyers, all patients, and we are looking at all sellers, that is all physicians and all healthcare staff. Do you see what I'm saying? But it is for the same commodity. And what is that commodity? The healthcare services provided by Mercy Healthcare System. That is also microeconomics. Okay? So it may be between one person, between like individuals, or it may be for one particular commodity or service. But the unit is one. Is this clear? Any questions you have here? All of you get this? Okay. Now, when you take the blinders off, when you kind of shift the focus from narrow to broad, that becomes macroeconomics. Now, then what is macroeconomics? Macroeconomics is when I'm looking at all buyers within this country, USA, or all sellers within this country, USA, and I'm looking at their interaction. That is macroeconomics. If I say all buyers of healthcare services in USA, so it's a big picture. We are looking at all patients, all people who ever consume healthcare in USA. That's a big thing, right? And we are looking at all suppliers, all physicians, all nurses, all hospitals that provide healthcare services, health insurance companies that sell health insurance. We are looking at everyone. Okay? That is macroeconomics. So macroeconomics is kind of the big picture. And microeconomics is when you put blinders and you just focus on a very personalized interaction, or you look at one particular good or a service. Is that clear? You understand the difference between micro and macro? Now we will forget macro. After this class, we will not probably talk as much about macro, but we will talk more about micro, and that is lucky for us because it's always easy to visualize things in a narrow focus. You always, if I ask you what is happening, how will your decision affect America, you don't know. It's a big thing to picturize, it's a big thing to visualize. But if I ask you, how will your decision affect your family, you have an answer to that. Okay? Luckily for us, healthcare economics takes the foundation, is based on the foundation of microeconomics. Okay? It's about micro interactions in the society. But today, since we are starting with an introduction in economics, we will talk a little bit about macro. The reason being, when we do policy questions, when we come to the policy part of the course, healthcare policies, we will be using some principles of macroeconomics. That's why I want to kind of introduce that to you. Okay? Now, in macroeconomics, beyond these people, beyond buyers and sellers, do you think there is anybody else involved in the society or economy? Let's go back to our example, this classroom. I am the provider, I am the seller, I am the supplier of education. You are the demander, you need the education, you have to take this course, so you are demanding. You are the buyer or the consumer of this education. Besides us, is there anybody involved in this? Is there anybody whose decision affects either you or me or both of us? Who is that somebody?
Governing bodies, the director.
So basically either your department can have a rule that can affect you, or it can affect me, or it can affect both of us, or even in a bigger picture, it can be Missouri State University, president, provost, right? The university itself, it can take a decision tomorrow which affects you as a student, or it affects me as an instructor, or it affects both of us, right? So that means there is some authority beyond a buyer and a seller. There may be a third party in the society which is in a more authoritative position. So when we are talking about the country as a whole, who do you think is that authority? The government. The government is the third party. So in macroeconomics, besides looking at buyers and sellers, we also kind of consider the government. And that is the reason that beyond microeconomics, you also need a little bit of foundation into macro, because healthcare is that kind of a sector where government intervention and role of the government cannot be ruled out altogether, especially when it comes to policies and rules. The government does things, the government takes decisions, the government comes up with policies which does affect a buyer of healthcare and it does affect a seller of healthcare. So we need to kind of appreciate and kind of at least recognize the role of the government. Okay? So the government is also there. So that means in economics, or let's say in macroeconomics, we are not just studying the interaction between economic agents, but we are also studying the interactions between these economic agents and the government. Okay? In other words, we are studying economy-wide interactions. Economy-wide, it's called economy-wide interactions. So in macroeconomics, we are studying not just the interactions between these two groups of economic agents, but also the interaction of these agents with the government. Okay? Now, based on the nature of these interactions, different countries can have different nature of this interaction. Now, what do I mean by different nature of these interaction? There may be some countries where the government plays a very passive role. Like the government wants to sit back and relax and let the people, let the buyers and the sellers decide and sort out their own problems, fight amongst each other, and eventually resolve their issue and come to a point of agreement. The government does not want to step in. Okay? That kind of an economy is called a free market economy. A free market economy. Also sometimes called a capitalist economy. The classic example being your own country, USA. Okay? So what happens? The government does not believe in stepping into your life, poking nose into your life at every step. The government has immense faith on the economic agents, and the government thinks that no matter how big the problem it is, the buyers and the sellers themselves can fight it out, they can resolve the issue, and they can come to a point of agreement. And you will eventually see, as we move into the semester, you will see what I mean by the point of agreement and what I mean by resolving the issue. Today, it's just, I'm just giving you a broad perspective. Okay? So in the free market, the government does not want to step in all the time. Now, does that mean that in a capitalist country, the government is totally dormant? It is sleeping? Does it never intervene in our lives? What do you think in your own country? Are there situations where the government intervenes? Yes, of course. When people cannot fight it out by themselves, when they cannot come to a point of agreement, then the government intervenes. That means when there is a failure of the free market in a capitalist economy, that is when the government steps in. So in case of market failure, the government does intervene, the government does step in. Now, there may be another group of countries where the government is extremely active. So the government wants to poke their nose in every single thing that the economic agent does. Okay? And those countries are also called the socialist countries. Now, having said that, in today's world, there is no country that is a pure socialist country. There is no country that is absolute a socialist country, means they tell you everything that you have to do. The last socialist country that we probably had was USSR, the Soviet bloc, which disintegrated. Right now, we have countries which are little more socialist than others. Okay? So we don't really have very absolutely textbook definition of socialism, we don't have anymore. These countries would be the socialist countries. Some examples would be China, Denmark, Finland, and there are others also. But the idea is that these countries want to make everybody better off. They want to do welfare. That's why they say that we are going to take decisions for you. We are going to intervene. Okay? Now, for instance, in China, an example of that, until like 4 or 5 years back, I think China had a policy. They were trying to deal with population explosion. They were having immense growth in population, so they went with a one-child policy. Just imagine that policy in USA. The government telling you how many kids you should have. You can't even think of that here, right? There's a reason you call this a free country. But in China, people had to accept that. It was a government policy, or one-child policy. Okay? And then finally, when they got the population growth rate under control, they decided to do away with it. Right now, they have done away with it. Okay? But that policy worked. Worked in the sense it did control, it did bring down the population growth rate. But it's an important intervention by the government in a very important personal decision, right? So that's the nature of a socialist country. And then besides these two kind of countries, you have a third group of countries. Those are called the mixed economies. Mixed economy. And one example of that is the country that I come from, India. You also have the example of Canada, neighboring country for USA. Okay? So these countries kind of take characteristics of capitalism in certain things and take characteristics from socialism in certain things, and they have a mixed kind of setup. So for important decisions like healthcare, education, they like being socialist. Or in other words, in important sectors, the government wants to intervene. Whereas in some less important stuff, the government lets the free market decide. For example, if you have your own financial decision where you should put your money, the government will let you decide where you have to put your money. But if it comes to, let's say, healthcare, the government runs the hospitals. It's all owned by the government. It's not open to private, okay? So that way the government controls the quality. Like in Canada, healthcare is provided by the government. Okay, so the government intervenes in certain important sectors, but for other less important things, the government lets the free market do its work. Those are called mixed economies. Do you have any questions? So that means the bottom line is we are looking at economy-wide interactions, that is interaction between the behavior of economic agents, that is buyers and sellers, between themselves and also with the government. And depending on the nature of that interaction, depending on how much intervention is there and how frequent intervention is there by the government, we can divide countries into three groups. USA being, example of capitalism, and there are other countries which could be little socialistic, and like I told you, there is no pure socialism in today's world, and there are other countries which is mixed economy. So most countries nowadays in today's world will either be capitalist, pure capitalist, or they would be mixed economies. We don't see as much socialism. Now, coming to the most important question, that is, with all this interaction and with all this behavior that we are going to study, and all of this capitalism, socialism, what are we trying to get at? What are the questions that we are trying to answer in economics? Or what are the questions we are trying to answer through all these interactions, the study of these interactions? In economics, we are studying 4 important questions broadly. We are trying to find answers to these 4 questions. Is what to produce, and I will tell you what that means, how to produce, for whom to produce, and how to distribute. What do I mean by that? Let's go down to microeconomics. Let's think about it from a very narrow perspective. Okay, let's say you have a family. There is a certain income that comes into the family, right? So you decide, after getting the income, you decide how, where, what you should buy, right, with that income. What should be bought with the money? First you decide that. You make a kind of a budget. So much will go into groceries, so much will go into mortgage, so much will go into savings. So you're deciding on what, right? Then you decide on how. That means, okay, if I'm going to spend $500 on grocery, am I going to get that grocery from Walmart or from Price Cutter or from Mama Jeans or whatever, or Harter House, right? So you decide how you're going to spend that. And then you decide for whom. Once you bring the groceries home, you decide, are you going to put a major share of the groceries on, your kids, or for the elderly, or yourself, right? So you decide how to distribute, or for whom. You decide for whom it is designed. And once you decide for whom, then you decide how to distribute it. Let's say you decide, okay, this week I have got groceries, and most of the stuff that I've got in groceries this week are for my kids. Now you decide that, am I going to kind of spread it out this way over the week, or am I going to spread it out for the first 3 days, and for the rest 4 days I'm going to bring more groceries? You do that planning within the family, right? So you decide what, how, for whom, and how to distribute. Similarly for the country, same for the macroeconomy. The government has to decide, or the economy together as a whole has to decide that, okay, all the resources that we have in this country, how should be, for what we should use those resources? What should be produced in this country? Okay, what are the things? And there will not be one single item, right? There will be several items, but what? And then the question is how? How should the country produce it? The third question would be, for whom? Should it be for the women? Should it be more for the men? Should it be for the children? Should it be for the elderly? So for whom should we produce? Okay? And lastly, once we have produced the goods, once the country has the goods and services, how is that going to be distributed? So everything that we are going to study this semester is going to be under one of those questions. It's either going to be about what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce, or how it is getting distributed. And when we talk about healthcare, these two questions become very important. For whom and how to distribute.